I believe spring begins not on March 21st. It begins when daylight savings time begins and the Red Sox are in spring training. That's when, in Boston, we start to feel that the winter is over.
Today, I'm catching up with Senator Ed Markey. We're covering TikTok, daylight savings time, the environment. But first, let's start by talking about Malden. Can you start off telling me a little bit about the spot that we're in and its connection to your family?
Yeah, this is the Malden Senior Center, but it's also a youth center. When they were opening it, they asked me if they could name it after my mother and father. My mother grew up here in Malden. She was one of 5 daughters of an immigrant Irish couple. My grandmother died when my mother was 17 and president of the senior class here in Malden. And so she had to raise her younger sisters in Malden. And
you told me she was one of 5, right?
She was one of 5 girls. So the oldest had to go off to work, and then my mother had to be the mother for the youngest 3 sisters in the family. And so we've been here for a long time. So they are honored, obviously, by having this center named after them. But it's in memory of every single kind of immigrant story here to Malden in terms of making this the great city, which it is. And now it's new immigrants from Europe, from Asia, from Africa, from South America, who are populating the city and making it even greater in the 21st century than it was in the 20th.
What makes Malden distinct from the cities and towns that are right around it?
When I was a boy, Malden had 3 theaters, the Auditorium, the Granada, the Strand. We had a Jordan Marsh, a real department store downtown. We were a center. All the buses came through Malden. We had one of the most beautiful libraries of any city in the United States. We felt special. We are not Boston. We're just north of Boston. And many people just ride through at a high rate of speed. But we have a great sense of pride about our community, what we represent historically. So Malden is part of a collection of small cities because we did not get absorbed back in the late 19th century as part of the expansion of New York City, Philadelphia, Chicago. We would be North Philly. We would be North Chicago. But these communities all said, no, we were part of the American Revolution. We were part of the founding of this country. We are not going to be absorbed. And so these individual histories are very important. And if you come from Malden, you just grow up feeling special. That you're from a place that has a rich history, but an even richer future.
You're making me want to move back with that tribute to your hometown. I want to ask you about what's happening with TikTok, because it looks like the United States may be headed toward banning the use of TikTok over national security concerns involving that Chinese ownership stake and privacy rights. You're kind of a TikTok power user, and I say that as someone who has yet to get comfortable with TikTok. It kind of unsettles and confuses me, but you're on there a lot. You're engaging with constituents, asking about important issues. What's your sense of whether banning TikTok would be a good way to go?
Well, my view about TikTok is that it is, in fact, something that many times is preying upon young people in our country, but no different than American companies as well. So when 1 in 3 teenage girls in the United States last year reported that they contemplated suicide, and much of it is social media related, we need a privacy bill of rights for all children, teenagers in our country. And the big companies have fought me the whole way, and I think this could be finally my opportunity. Just to say that the great threat to our country is to the children, it's to the teenagers. So yes, on the one hand, I think that TikTok should be banned from a governmental institutions' use, but in terms of the general use of TikTok or any of these social media sites, it is absolutely critical that we put in place as part of this discussion a privacy bill of rights, not only for teenagers, but for all Americans.
I really like the idea of a privacy bill of rights, in part because I have a couple daughters, one soon to be a teenager, one currently a teenager. But just so I'm clear on this, you don't see an extra threat posed by TikTok because of that Chinese ownership stake and possible privacy violations when it comes to the general American public?
Well, there's a CFIUS review that is taking place right now. That is a review by a governmental agency of the impact which TikTok has upon our society. And I think we should await the conclusion of that study, but I don't think we have to wait to say that this whole discussion about the impact that it's having upon children and the fact that the Chinese don't allow their children to be on TikTok for anything other than informational and educational purposes, and in our country, it's wide open all day long. Well, the same thing is true for every other website, every other social media site in the United States. So I think while we await the conclusive study of the impact on our national security, I think that we should absolutely take this as an opportunity to put a comprehensive privacy bill of rights in place. I'm just sick and tired of the big tech companies in the United States blocking my privacy bill of rights for teenagers in our country. It is a public health crisis.
You've been sharply critical of President Biden's decision to give the go-ahead to the Willow project that'll expand oil drilling in Alaska. Why do you think President Biden made that call?
Well, obviously, I worked very closely with President Biden to pass the IRA, the largest climate bill in the history of any country in the world.
The Inflation Reduction Act.
The Inflation Reduction Act. That was $369 billion just last August. That's unleashing a wind and solar, all-electric vehicle, battery storage technology revolution in our country. The benefits are already palpable. So I was disappointed that the president gave the okay to the Willow project, even in reduced form. My own view is that it's not needed, that we're going to have a world where the which we needed in the past is just going to be replaced by electric-driven cars. We're going to have 50% of all new vehicles in the United States will be electric by the year 2030, only 7 years from now. So we put 70% of all the oil we consume into gasoline tanks. The oil industry continues to say, drill, baby, drill, but young people say, plug in, baby, plug in, and that revolution is going to take place. It's unfair to the native communities of Alaska. It sends the wrong signal to the rest of the world. You cannot preach temperance from a bar stool. You can't tell the rest of the world that they should be conserving when we're giving the okay to the oil industry for projects that are not needed. I introduced the Green New Deal with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez just 4 years ago, and it created a movement that drove the passage of the IRA, of the huge climate bill last year. And I think that young people will be disappointed if this isn't anything other than a one-off, an exception, because they really do believe that preceding generations have let them down. They've left them with the consequences of unrestrained greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere. So from my perspective, I'm going to fight hard to make sure that this is it, that he doesn't make any other decisions of this nature, because we're going to need them as a political army in the 2024 election cycle. Donald Trump's coming, MAGA Republicans are coming. We've got a good answer for it, that we're creating millions of jobs, we're reducing greenhouse gases, while at the same time bringing environmental justice to communities like Chelsea and Roxbury and Malden that have long been the places where the polluters felt that they could have their free reign.
Is there anything looming, whether it's regulatory decisions or legislation the president could get behind that would help him, to your eye, get back on the right side of environmental considerations?
Right now at the Environmental Protection Agency, they're in the process of promulgating the regulations for heavy trucks, for all vehicles, for this coming generation. They're also in the process of promulgating the rules and regulations for the utility sector in our country for the coming generation. Both of those decisions and the rules that will be promulgated as a result will set us on a course to meet our highest goals for reducing greenhouse gases and unleashing millions of new union jobs in our country. So I'm working closely with the EPA as the chairman of the Climate Change Subcommittee in the Senate to make sure that those regulations are strong. I met with the head of the EPA last week. I talked to the White House again last week about those regulations, how important it is to make them as strong as is historically possible.
When will we know if the EPA and the White House heed that advice?
We could see the first regulations as soon as the end of April. And I've just asked them to lift their gaze to the constellation of possibilities for our country, for our planet, for the next generation, and to just put aside the concerns which these polluting companies are bringing to the table. It's just time for us to make the historic change we have to make.
I'm curious, you've been in Congress now approaching half a century, right? You started in 1976. My sense has always been that even if government is divided, my sense from the outside, even if government's divided, there's the possibility of bipartisan cooperation on at least some issues. How does that possibility of bipartisan, meaningful bipartisan collaboration right now stack up to other points in your tenure?
Well, obviously in a very polarized atmosphere right now. But even with that said, it's still possible to move to find Republicans who are concerned about the fact that 1/3 of all teenage girls contemplated suicide last year, to pass a comprehensive child online privacy bill. So there I'm working with Senator Bill Cassidy from Louisiana, very conservative Republican, to move towards that legislation. Just in December, I was successful with Republicans, including Roy Blunt from Missouri, to pass $25 million to have the CDC study for the first time the impacts of social media on young people in our country. And I'm going to be working very closely on community health center reauthorization this year as the chairman of the health subcommittee in the Senate to see if we can't do something finally about this dramatic shortage that we have in nurses, in doctors, in mental health professionals in our country. We're down 400,000 nurses in our country right now.
That's
and
a
I think,
number.
And much of it would be in rural America, where they're more red state. So my hope is that I'll be able, once again, I have 590 laws on the books signed by presidents, and every time I had to find a Republican, and that's what I'm doing right now, once again, trying to find the Republicans that I can partner with to solve these huge societal issues.
Let me ask you about an issue which may not be quite as big as the ones that you mentioned, but is of intense interest to you, also me and other people whose mood is determined by the amount of light we happen to get on a given day. You're partnering again with Senator Marco Rubio to try to make daylight savings time permanent, right? So that would keep in place the setting of the clocks that we are currently experiencing. Am I getting that right?
That's right.
Okay. Because every year I need to remind myself how daylight savings time works and what it means. What's holding this up? Because to a lot of people, I really like it to be light later. I feel like it helps my mood, makes me happier. People around me seem to be happier. What's the holdup here?
Well, the holdup is that even though there aren't many of them, there's enough fans of darkness who still populate the House and Senate to be able to block passage of year-round daylight savings time. But we can already see the benefits of daylight savings time. We're in the second week of it right now. There's an extra hour in the evening. It makes the corners of people's mouths turn upwards with a smile. They can go out for a walk longer, go shopping, begin to play tennis or softball or Little League. And so all of the benefits are obvious, and Marco Rubio and I are going to work as the senators from the Sunshine State and the Bay State, to bring this gift to Americans all across the country. We got it passed in the Senate last year. We're going to continue to work to get it done. I started to work on daylight savings time back when I was the chairman of the Energy Subcommittee. And time has to come under some jurisdiction in Congress, so it comes under the Energy Subcommittee. So I had it. So I moved it over the years from the end of April, the last weekend in April, to the beginning of March. And instead of being 6 months daylight and 6 months standard, it's now 8 months daylight and 4 months standard. So I was able to get that done.
Thanks.
But I won't be finished until we can make it year round. And with Marco, and he and I have partnered before in passing legislation, including on fentanyl detection at our borders that was signed into law, he and I are committed to actually ultimately being successful.
Senator Ed Markey, thank you for the conversation. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Adam. Thanks for coming over here to the great city of Malden.
It's great to be back.